Good morning, everybody. Glad you're all here. Hi. This message came to me while driving in the car, and I remember having this flash of saying, oh wow, I haven't taught a message in a long time. What was my process again? And then all of a sudden it was like a lightning bolt, and I saw the entire message in one moment, and that's when I knew it was not only going to be an important one, but one that was timely for each of us in this room. And the world. I feel like often the micro and the macro have a very interconnected relationship. And as it is freshly the new year of 2025, I think people's nerves are a bit activated. There's a lot that seems to be happening in the world, from, drones and an alien invasion to, talk of world war and everything going on in the Middle East. And it can certainly make things feel unstable and unknown, which is not an ideal thing to be surrounded by when we're starting fresh the new year, right? Typically people want to wake up on January 1st and say, these are my New Year's resolutions, I'm gonna do all these things, I'm gonna turn over this new leaf and be this great new person. But instead, we all kind of woke up to things feeling quite strange and out of order. It's already hard to establish New Year's resolutions and stick by them, but I'm finding that it's particularly hard in this season right now. Many people that I've spoken to are feeling disconnected in their lives. Things don't feel quite right, almost as if they're in some sort of a haze. They know what they should be doing, but they're kind of moving through the steps in a way that feels automatic and almost like a robot, right? They're not very present to what they're doing. And I think if we shift dimensions and look at the spiritual battle that is always unfolding in a way that we can't see with our naked eye, there's something to that. I feel like we've all been shaken in a way that's trying to almost like pull us out of our bodies a little bit. So we're moving around, we know what we're supposed to do. Okay, I make coffee by putting the coffee pot here and hitting this button. But we're kind of checked out and we're just doing it almost like rote memorization. Not that we're thinking, I wonder what coffee I want, thinking about the scent of the coffee or what kind of milk I want, really being present to every bit of the taste of the coffee we've just made or the smell of the coffee we've just made. We're just kind of going through the motions. I think what God is asking us to do in particular in this moment is to remember how important it is to be present in the instance, in the moment. A lot of times, many of us are reflective. Maybe when we go to bed at night, we kind of replay what happened throughout the day, comb through for detail, what could I have done better, what went wrong. But very infrequently are we truly present in every moment, every conversation, every time we're locking eyes with somebody. We're thinking about 10 other things. We're just trying to get through our day. Or for some of us, we're seeking pleasure. Oh, I can get through this pain as long as I can seek this pleasure afterward. What God has revealed to me about lament as a state of being, as a mental state, is that it's actually an incredibly transformative place, but so many of us try to skip over it. This is what leads us to addiction. I don't like how I feel right now. I don't like this pain. I don't like the struggle, so I'm gonna go do heroin. I don't like this pain and struggle, so to blow off steam, I'm gonna go drink tonight. There are a variety of other coping mechanisms that we can lean into, but there's a part of our social fabric that tries to make us believe if this sucks, we'll go blow off steam with our friends later. We'll go make it better. We're always trying to counteract the bad with the good. Oh, well, this hurts, so I'll go do something that feels like pleasure. God is really trying to speak to us here to be present in the pain and the struggle and not just seek to get around it, to escape it, to spiritually bypass it, which actually I think a lot of Christians try to do. So he wants us to go through this message today and see all the ways that we're trying to get around it or pray our way out of it or pray for, really God's will, but really we're trying to pray for our own will here. And I think he's trying to show a light on where we're trying to do this, instead of actually allowing ourselves to be in the struggle. Has anyone here ever had prolonged seasons of struggle? Blankenships? Right, so struggle can be a great benefit. Sarai, you've had some struggle, right? Sarai always jokes about all the cards she can pull. I'm not going to say them out loud here, but she's got a lot of different cards. Oh, should I use this card? she says the disabled card a lot, right? Because she's got cerebral palsy, but she's got other cards that she can pull. Struggle often makes us who we are, and if we're really honest with ourselves, the more we try to shield our kids from struggle and give them this perfect life, white picket fence, helicopter parent, rob them from anything, what happens? I mean, those of us that know break speak are like, they become rejections. But more than that, they end up fixating on problems that the rest of us would think are very small and like not worth caring about, but their brain forces them to fixate on it, and it becomes a really big deal. I think generationally, we've seen this become very prevalent. I know in all the teen clients I work with, rejection patterns are more and more and more common. Think about even the role that social media would play in that. You're literally becoming fixated on what others think, and then you're getting positive feedback. Oh, they gave me a like, they wrote me a comment. So it's literally forcing people to have a pattern like that, where you're not situationally where you're aware of what's on your phone or what sort of pleasure dopamine hit you're seeking. All of this is escaping the pain and struggle often that God crafts intentionally in our lives to help us grow. Some of the most profound exponential leaps and bounds I've had personally were through the worst pain and struggle. When people find out about certain things that have happened to me, and they're like, what? How are you still here? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm able to do what I do. I teach what I teach because of that. I wouldn't be able to do any of these things without that. I think back to so many moments in my life where things could have gone just slightly differently, and I would be not a cool person. I'll say it like that. I'd be so snobby, so mean, totally of the world. There's so many things that could have gone that way, but I'm grateful that they didn't. I'm grateful that God manufactured pain and struggle in my life to turn me into the person that I am today. And I believe this is a tool that is used obviously throughout the Bible, but it's used by God in all of our lives, and often we just want to get it over with instead of be present to it. So I want everyone to think for a moment back to a time that you found yourself in some sort of struggle or pain. What's your instinct? What do you do? Try and get rid of it. Anyone else? What do you do?
There's like a past way I would have done things.
Okay, what's the past way you would have done it?
Probably avoidance or distraction.
Right, looked for distraction, found a way to just do something else instead. Anyone else? Make it worse. Thank you for honesty, sir. Make it worse, double down, like, oh, that ain't nothing. Wait and see what I can do. Right, so some things that I called out here would be avoidance, denial, but also immediate prayers for deliverance. Like, God, I know you're gonna do it. It's like, well, but what if that's not God's will? And one of the things that I just kept envisioning as I was writing this message is how many Christians I've met that are so programmed to lean into a belief of, we already won, God's already done it, right? Where it's like they're skipping to the end. So they're almost in denial about what's taking place right in front of them. So they're almost pretending that it's not happening. Example would be somebody is clearly, and I've seen this and I know some of you have, where people are part of a church that has I'll just say culture of giving, you know what I'm saying? Seeds, if you will, where people are like completely in poverty, should not be spending their money. And people are like, I'm rich in heaven, so they're like doing all, okay. There's definitely a ton of corruption there. And is it a good thing for us to give? Yes, but has God also called us to be good stewards of our money? Yes, okay? But in particular, let's say somebody is in poverty, they owe a bunch on their bills, and they're thinking, if I just do this, in my mind, in my delusion, I'm already XYZ, so I'm just gonna keep giving away all my money. Is there a chance that God could pull off a miracle and things go great for them? For sure. God can do anything. But more often than not, I've seen people in that environment give, and instead be like, why am I still like this? Why are things still this bad? And it's because they're believing a delusion. They're like trying to get out of it or believe that they've already gotten out of it instead of realizing, I'm in this maybe because I have lessons to learn, and maybe I need to learn how to steward my money, or maybe I need to learn how to make better decisions. So there is this Christian mentality of like, I already won, it's already done, like I'm already, even though I'm poor, I'm rich in heaven. So it's like you're not present to what's actually taking place. And then God can't help you grow and transform because of it. Because you're just thinking like, I'm already fine. But really, I want to point out that's delusion. And often people will throw God into the mix when really it's delusion. So also some people in that process of pain, again, will just start praying for God to fix the situation. Like, I know you're going to fix it, I know you're going to fix it. But they have an expectation that it's going to be fixed like right now. And they don't realize that maybe God crafted this. And this isn't like Satan attacking you, but maybe God did this or allowed this because you have an area where you have to grow. So spending all of your time trying to pray it away is missing God's will for your life entirely. Let's take a look at what the word lament even means, because I know it's a word that's not used very often. So it's an honest expression of sorrow, grief, or pain, and it's typically directed at God. So think of it as a posture of communication. It seeks understanding, comfort, but the most important thing here is without denying the reality of the suffering. Lament is where we are supposed to be biblically when things are going poorly or what we perceive to be not our way. We need to be present to the suffering. We're not trying to deny it. We're not trying to delude ourselves into thinking that we are somewhere that we are not, because then God can't actually provide us the wisdom we need to learn the lesson to get out of the situation. A posture is an attitude or position of the heart, the mind, and it's also a response to God, and it reflects the inner disposition of your heart. It reflects your faith, how obedient you are, how humble you are. So being in a posture of lamentation is something that is very important, and God uses this very frequently in our lives. But I think we're often not taught about it. Like, I've never heard it once preached in church, and it's something that God, I feel like, really wants us to understand, is that this is a posture that is important, and perhaps we're going to be here sometimes this year, and that's okay, I think, as a collective. And it's okay for us to be present to the suffering and not just try to deny it away. And another example of this could be, which, fine line here, right? Like, could Jesus come back at any moment, any hour, and we won't know the day or the hour? Of course. But is it also beneficial to not be present to what's unfolding right now, to be like, it's fine, Jesus is going to come, right? Where you're just kind of denying the reality of right now because Jesus is going to come. The posture God wants us to be in right now is to be present and aware of the suffering so that he can reveal what we have to do in the suffering, rather than delude ourselves into thinking, oh, well, whatever, we're not even going to pay attention to this because it's not real. Although, when we understand multidimensionality, like, is this the only reality? Of course not. But I believe God's going to use many of his people to move chess pieces around the chessboard in these times of struggle. And if we just keep trying to delude ourselves into thinking like none of this is real, it makes it harder for God to move our chess pieces around. So think of us as both receiver and transmitter. It's important to be aware of what's happening in the higher realms, but we also are here, right? Whether you believe that we chose to be here or however you look at that, I really think that there was a conscious decision to come here, and that obviously we have the Spirit of God, and that we were written into the book of life, and that our destiny essentially is already sealed before we even come into our mother's womb. But once we're here, we have to honor the physical life that we have. So many people, and I see even Christians, just try to bypass it, right? Heaven come now. Well, in heaven, I'm XYZ. But what about right now? For us to be accurate, discerning transmitter receivers, we have to both honor the physicality that we have and also be aware, right, sober of mind, to notice what's happening in the physical world. That's why God calls us to stay sober of mind. If we're in, what we've talked about in this teaching collective before as the fourth dimensional time distortion, it becomes really challenging for us to know what's really happening in the third dimension or is part of our maybe dancing with the astral or things that are in the higher realms. For us to be used effectively in this season, God is really calling us to be here physically, even if it's suffering or even if it feels like something that's dark or scary. We have to really be here. That's the posture he wants us in. So to help understand this story a little bit more, God highlighted the Israelites' journey, obviously, through the desert for 40 years. And the question that I want us to think about is what happens when we resist lessons of hardship and focus on complaint instead of faith? Have you ever done that in a season where everything is just complaining? Oh my God, when is this going to end? You're just mad. Or instead of when is this going to end, like this is never going to end, right? Going into that boogeyman of forever. Well, I was raised Jewish in New York, as many of you know, and culturally, we complain. We're complainers. We're very guilt-focused. What, you don't like my cooking? Eat, you're getting too skinny. It's I don't think they're getting too skinny. But the Israelites, as they're traveling through the desert for 40 years, right? God has saved them from the Pharaoh in Egypt, and what do they do for 40 years? They walk around, but they complain a lot. And they not only complain, they have very specific complaints. They're complaining about the food, the water, right? So let's take a look at what they were complaining about, because instead of just being like, thank you for delivering us from the Pharaoh, they spend 40 years basically mad and maybe we should go back. Maybe dying with food and water is better than this. In Exodus 15:24, so the people grumbled against Moses, saying, what are we to drink? Then in 16:2-3, in the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. If only we were dead already. Thanks a lot. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, why did you bring us out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst? And then we go to all the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. So not only did they not recognize what they were being delivered from, they actually wanted to go back to their captor. Has anyone ever been in a bad situation and you're like, maybe it's better to go back? Okay. Think about toxic relationships here. Everyone's been in this situation before where things are so bad and you finally get the gall to get out of it, and then as you're in the little wobbles of the very budding stages of getting out of it, you want to go backward. You're like, maybe it wasn't so bad. We had good times. They only hit me 3 times, right? We're bargaining about all the things that were, at the time, terrible. But now we're deluding ourselves into thinking that's not so bad. Because we don't like the loneliness or the unknown of walking away, right? Being in the new uncharted where we don't know where we are, we don't know what to expect. So have you ever tried to navigate out of a toxic relationship? Was that easy? Did you take 2 steps forward, 10 steps back, 2 steps forward, 10 steps back? Brain pattern-wise, a lot of us, myself included, have certainly done this before. What about a chaotic situation where the situation's so bad you finally get up the guts to get out of it, and then you're like, it's better to go back. I had security there, I had stability. Sometimes leaving a situation and starting over is actually the most painful thing because it's unknown and you end up lonely in the process. You trick yourself into wanting to go back, just like the Israelites in the desert. Now, they wandered for 40 years, and this is just a hypothesis, but I think there's biblical evidence to support this. Is it possible that how much they complained the entire time made them miss the lesson, therefore maybe causing a 10-year journey to become 40 years? Because God's like, you're clearly not getting it yet. So in the desert you shall stay. Sometimes we actually, by way of not being in that true posture of lament, we make things last longer. We literally are the reason that our pain and suffering is prolonged. You're doing it to yourself. Hear me on this one. It's not God. God, why have you made this last for 40 years? Well, if you'd been present to the lesson I was trying to teach you and allowed yourself to be transformed, perhaps this would have been done sooner. Let's look at 3 characters who, I don't know why those ones aren't filled, but apparently there's lorem ipsum there. Don't know what happened. So let's take a look at 3 characters. We're going to look specifically at Job, Jesus, and David. Each one of these characters in the Bible had a moment where they very much were in that posture of lament, and they walked it through very accurately. Now, this is an AI-created image. Did Job really look like that? I don't know. I wouldn't have pictured him that way, but apparently AI thinks he looks like the Dos Equis guy, the most interesting man in the world, but look in the Bible. Okay, so in Job 42, 2-3, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. If you're familiar with Job's journey, he was in the pits of despair a lot. God allowed Satan to essentially completely destroy his life and test him. Job has ups and downs, as any of us would have ups and downs, right? Submitting to God's will, crying out for God, why have you done this to me? Even wishing death upon himself, which is not uncommon with some of the biblical characters. It becomes so painful that often they wish to die instead of actually to walk it through to the end, final point of their destiny, which is what's happening when we come into Job 42. He's saying, I spoke of things I didn't understand. Like, now that I see it all, I regret ever saying that I wanted to die. Let's take a look at Jesus. This is in Matthew 26:39. Going a little further, he fell, his face to the ground, and prayed, Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. Jesus, knowing exactly what was to come, still had this moment of saying, like, maybe not. Like, could we do it differently? We could, maybe, no? Okay. Ultimately, your will, not my will. Has anyone ever been in that moment where you know it's going to be hard and you're like, okay, God, like, I'm going to do it. I'm a soldier for you, but like, maybe we don't have to? Like, could you go easy on me? But still, you, not me. I think that's a really realistic thing for us to try to achieve, right? It's not wrong or sinful to want something other than the pain we've become aware of, either through like a vision or a dream or just that internal knowing. But at the end of the day, our posture needs to be, if you could soften the blow, that would be great, but also only what you want. I will submit to your will no matter what. I think it's the most achievable for many of us who are gifted. Sometimes we end up knowing the pain before it comes, which I think is an honor and a deep respect from the relationship that you have cultivated with God, but it can be really hard because you can self-sabotage. If you know what's going to come, it becomes really easy to try to avoid it, get around it, soften the blow, pray against it. This is the key, and that's why I put it in the middle. I mean, obviously it's also Jesus, but this is one of the keys. It's okay to ask for something else, but ultimately you have to declare, I am willing to do exactly what you want no matter what. And if what I just asked for isn't it, then let it fly away. And it's something that I pray all the time. Whenever I pray for something that I want or that, you know, I feel like the company needs or the business needs, I'll ultimately always say, but God, if that's not your will and that's not what you want, let it literally fall out of my mind and let me forget that I ever wanted it, right? Just completely take it away. Let's look at David. David, who actually wrote Lamentations as well. Psalm 13, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. And my enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing of the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. So even in this moment when he feels completely disconnected and separated from his relationship with God, which was at one point very close, he's calling out for him. exhausted, exasperated, obviously lonely. Like, how long are you going to ice me out? Has anyone ever been in a relationship where someone just stonewalled you for a long time and you're like, when are you going to drop this act and just talk to me? Doesn't feel good, right? This is what David experienced with God. How long are you going to shut me out? But he also never lost faith that at one point, if he just stayed persistent, God would let him back in. Oftentimes, when we're in that place of despair and we're in pain, and let's say we feel like we've lost that tether to God, what a lot of people end up doing? Cursing him, be like, you're not even real. All of this is a load of crap. Has anyone ever been there? This isn't real. This is all delusional. And it's tricky, right? When we're dealing with things that are connected to spiritual laws and things that are higher dimensional, it's easy to do that dance of, is this real? Is this not real? Am I a crazy person? Am I a faithful person? Where's the line? Truly following Jesus will make you look like a crazy person. It's why he says that everyone will eventually hate you, right? It's a very tough line to walk because you are straddling two worlds. You're in the world, but you're not of the world. You're seeing in the spirit, but you're able to take those cues and put them into action in the physical. It's all very complex and very confusing. But God does transform us through pain and suffering, and instead of in those hard moments where we feel like we've lost that connection, convince ourselves this whole thing isn't real or curse God, we have to remain like David. David's like, I miss you. Why have you forsaken me? Why aren't you talking to me anymore? But ultimately continues to show up and continues to send off that message, that cry out to God that I know that you're good and I know that your will is here present in my life, and that's what I want. We have to think about why God would allow hardship in our life. And I know for me, it's really easy for me to point to because it's how I've become who I am. We have to take a look at what happens when we try to resist God's will and seek relief or comfort instead of actually be present to the pain. So in general, I think one of the big things God's trying to reveal to us here is that we have to desire God's will over our comfort. And I mean, many of us really want to be comfortable. We want to be happy. We want to seek pleasure. And that's just not what we are called to do as followers of Jesus Christ. It won't be comfortable. It won't be relaxing. It won't be pleasurable. He literally says, like, follow me if you hate your wife and children, because your life is basically going to unravel. If you are in a season of hardship or storm, it's important that you are present to that pain and learn how to press into that relationship and grow instead of bypass. Is anyone here guilty of trying to bypass? Right? Pretty common. And I would say that here there's bypassing spiritually, there's bypassing through substances, there's bypassing through sex, anything that makes you feel better, like I'm just going to numb out and pretend that this isn't happening until it's over. Let's take a look at these two different passages from Lamentations. In 3:31 through 33, for no one is cast off by the Lord forever. Though he brings us grief, he will show compassion. So great is his unfailing love. Then we have 3:25, the Lord is good to those who hope in him. It is good to wait quietly for the Lord. As you know, at Chainbreaker, we always try to tie the songs that we're doing in worship to the message today. And I know it was a new one for many of you, but that Wait on the Lord song, I think, is so important for this message because oftentimes we are in a physical situation where it feels like everything has gone completely wrong. The very first line of it is in a hospital, right, where he's watching a doctor come say, there's nothing more we can do, right? It's like the worst news you can possibly get. Typically want to get angry, right? Human beings' instinct when you get news like that where you're like in hopelessness and somebody has forced you into a situation that you don't want to be in and they say nothing can be done, we want to get angry. We want to free ourselves. We want to rally against the person who is keeping us held captive to whatever their will is. We have to be able to wait. And patience is not a great human skill, and it's something that needs to be cultivated. And patience is even more important in the suffering. If we can have that posture of lamentation and actually be patient in the moment, ironically, it often ends up ending sooner. But just like the Israelites struggling through the desert, if we constantly want to get out of it or complain about how bad it is, it often ends up lasting longer. These are the prayer points that I think we can all focus on for the next couple of weeks because, like I said, I do think that we are in a season where whether it's happening to us personally or we have to be able to be a foundation and a rock for people around us in our lives, it's a season of hardship. I do think that there's a lot of huge breakthrough and transformation that's going to happen this year as well, but it does really feel like some people in our lives are going to need us to understand this message so that we can hold that space for them. So the questions that we should be asking ourselves are, where am I trying to escape or bypass? Where am I using spirituality as a delusion or a distortion away from what God's trying to teach me? Being able to truly learn the lesson and then actually embody that lesson is going to speed up this process. It always does if we look at any character in the Bible. What have I learned about the character of God in past trials and tribulations? This one is important because God can meet us in a really intimate, connected place when we're in pain. When we can't lean on any coping mechanism, no other person, it's just us and God in the pain. It's a really intimate place where you can learn so much about the character of God and grow closer to him. And so many people miss this opportunity because they're so mad that they curse him instead of draw him closer. Am I praying for my will over God's will just so that I can get past the pain? This is important. I hope everybody really listens to it and that you're honest with yourselves because we've all done it. There's nothing, there's nothing in this message that's meant to shame anyone. It's more just a kind of call to arms. Like, hey, we all need to do better in these areas. And they're so sneaky because our society programs us to do the opposite of what God's calling us to do and feel totally justified doing it. Oh, you're sick? Here, eat popsicles all day and watch movies, right? Just escape from whatever the pain that you're in. I've seen this in the mental health space. When kids are coddled when they get sick all the time as a child, guess what happens to them as adults? They seek the same thing and then they often get sick more often because they become addicted to it. Oh, well, I get all this love and attention by being sick, so then they become sick very often. We need to not do this. We've got to not try to escape the pain. Lament is not about giving up or giving in. It's about actually staying present with God in the pain and struggle and learning that you can grow and augment your faith in this time if you actually really choose to be aware and of sober mind and not just try to get it over with. Because honestly, being present to it is the fastest way out. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a great weekend. And I don't want to scare anybody about what's going to happen this year. It just feels like there are going to be people that might be struggling. And if you're in this room, you're going to have the gifting required to help pull people out. And I just don't think that this is talked about enough. So it's not to make people leave feeling down and be like, oh, great, we're going to go into a season of sorrow. It's like, no, remember that these are all important lessons that help us grow as a human collective and as individual soul spirits. And we need to be equipped, right? Being equipped is really everything. And God has a way for us to be equipped and walk this out in a way that helps us rather than harms us. Because it's never God's will to harm us, always to help us through it. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye, everybody online.